Welcome to the Health Science Podcast. I'm usually your host, Dr. Frank Sabatino, but today we got a little bit of a shift. We're changing things up a little bit. This is our 100th episode, and I'm so excited that we have gone this far and that we've had this incredible support from the National Health Association, who sponsors this show and provides this unique platform and opportunity. So today we're going to do something a little bit different, and we're going to interview me, so to speak. You're going to get to learn a little bit about me and why I'm in this position of being the host, what my background is, what my view is on terms of many of the things that are being promoted by the National Health Association. And we just want to have some fun today going over some of those nuts and bolts and some of my own journey, and hopefully it'll be instructive and inspirational to the people watching us today.
Welcome to the Health Science Podcast, brought to you by the National Health Association, the oldest organization in the world championing the extraordinary benefits of a whole plant food diet and healthy lifestyle, as well as water-only fasting. We believe that health results from healthful living and focus on evidence-based science that promotes the health of you and your loved ones, as well as the health of all animals and the environment. We feature experts from a cross-section of disciplines within the plant nutrition, vegan, psychological, environmental, and animal compassion sectors. I'm your host, Dr. Frank Sabatino, the NHA's Director of Health Education.
Welcome to the Health Science Podcast. This is, of course, sponsored by the National Health Association. And I'm really excited today because this is our 100th show. It's kind of a milestone for us. And we're really proud of getting this far. And we're really thankful to the NHA, the National Health Association, for their support of creating this really quality product. And I feel really blessed to have been part of this. And I think sometimes, in our audience, not everybody may know me or know about my background. So the question becomes, why is this guy why is he the host? What is this about? Why is he the person doing this? What's his background? What's his stuff? So we wanted to take this time, and I said, it might be nice to just kind of interview me a little bit for this 100th episode so people could get to know, why I am in this position. Because currently I am the Director of Health Education for the National Health Association. And, when this was first presented to me, it was kind of an interesting thing because I usually am on the other side of the microphone. I'm the one usually being interviewed. So to put me on this side was kind of, at first, I was kind of like, can I really do this? And as we started to go into it and we started to attract the kind of people that we've had through these remarkable shows, it has been actually a transformative experience for me because we've met some of the most diverse people in the field of nutrition and animal activism and environmental protection. And frankly, I've learned a lot, and I really feel blessed by seeing the positive impact that so many people out there are making. I think sometimes we could all get a little bit, taken aback and a little bit put off by some of the things we see in the world, and we can get pessimistic and kind of see the glass, half full. Half empty, I mean. And by meeting these people and seeing the positive things that so many people are doing, I have to say it's actually, helped and enhanced my own viewpoint about, life and what's going on to protect each other, to protect animals, to protect the planet. So, my journey goes way back. I grew up in the 1950s in New York City in the Bronx, and I grew up in a very conventional Italian household. So, all of my early years, I had some major bowel related issues, which is kind of intriguing. I had a lot of bowel discomfort, irritable bowel stuff. And of course, no one back then had any idea or put any faith in the idea that what we ate on a regular basis may have some impact on bowel function. And I remember the whole early childhood of every morning, I'd get up in the morning and have bacon and eggs and coffee with my father. I mean, this is until I was right through my childhood years, all through grammar school. And, I was eating the best stuff because my mother bought the best stuff. And it was a lot of meat and dairy and all of that. And of course, no one ever put together that maybe this eating situation, maybe these foods had some impact. And of course, they took me growing up in New York to many of the well-known, good docs, specialists in New York City, one of the meccas for kind of medical care and medical information. And it's funny to me, no one ever addressed the idea of diet. Now, of course, back in the 1950s, it was a little bit kind of like the Dark Ages. Some of you that go back that far may remember that in all of the lunchrooms, in all of the cafeterias, they had these charts on the wall with the basic 4 food groups. And 2 of those groups were meat and dairy products, which is kind of funny. And no one ever thought to turn those charts over to see that they were actually funded by the meat and dairy councils in America. But of course, that's the way it was. And I'm still shocked to this day how you can go to specialists like gastroenterologists and so on, and still many of them will not address the importance or the real relationship between diet and bowel function, which is kind of crazy. So I wanted to be a medical doctor from very early on in my life. I was fascinated by that all through my childhood. I had Dorland medical dictionaries by the time I was 12 years old. By the time I was 13, I had basically memorized all of the vessels, muscles, bones, joints in the human body. And I was going in that direction. I was a student in the City College of New York, which was a school in Harlem. And I met a man who was the father of a good friend of mine. And his name was Louis Acampora. He was an insurance salesman in the Bronx. The difference about Louis was he had collected an anti-medical and pro-lifestyle library for about 20 years of his life. And he was in constant correspondence with Dr. Herbert Shelton. And of those people that don't know Dr. Shelton, he's kind of the granddaddy of the natural hygiene movement, which was really what the NHA was in its inception. It used to be called the American Natural Hygiene Society. And Dr. Shelton, was one of the great proponents of the philosophy and practice of what became known as natural hygiene. And natural hygiene was just really a way to codify the lifestyle parameters that support life and health. So we know that we need food and rest and sunshine and activity. So the natural hygiene movement was all about these biological requirements with the idea that the body has the inborn ability to heal and be well. And if you provide the conditions that support life and health were going to follow, like water flows downhill. So it was a very basic philosophy, but very profound. And Dr. Shelton was probably one of the greatest proponents in writing and teaching of that whole philosophy. So Louis, this mentor of mine, this insurance salesman, when he found out that I was going through pre-med at the City University of New York, every time I would visit his home, he would attack me at every turn. And I would start reading my way through his library. And I started reading all of the works of Shelton. Now, mind you, I'm like 18, 19 at the time. And a lot of other philosophical and health pioneers like Alfred Korzybski with Science and Sanity, all of these books like Fasting Can Save Your Life by Shelton, and of course the great Bible of hygiene, which is Natural Hygiene, Man's Pristine Way of Life. So I began to read my way through this library of information, and I started to put a little bit of that plant-based approach into my life. And lo and behold, all of those bowel issues became a thing of the past. And I found it really quite fascinating that after 15 plus years of medical mismanagement, it took an insurance salesman from the Bronx to fix colitis and irritable bowel syndrome. So that kind of triggered me. And of course, at that time, we're talking now about the late 60s, I was a little street urchin because I went to college in Harlem. And at the time, it was a time of revolution and fermentation really at that time. So I was also, not only was I, eating that way, not only did I start to try to do a fast, I was also, kind of experimenting with all the crazy pharmaceuticals that were on the streets of New York at that time. So it was really an intriguing time of revolution and upheaval at that time. And so that was the impetus. And it's a funny story because I reading about fasting, which when you come from an Italian household like I did, the idea of voluntarily not eating unless there was a major famine was pretty much a foreign notion in an Italian household. So at first thinking about that, I was kind of like, oh my God, this is kind of such a strange thing. And I remember the first time I wanted to fast, I was going to stop eating for the day. And back then we lived near a place called the Bronx Botanical Garden, where it was kind of like a paradise right in the middle of the city. So all the neighborhoods with all of that. And then all of a sudden, this lush, beautiful gardens was right. So many of us would find respite, sanctuary in there. That's where we kind of hung out. That's where people had a lot of philosophical conversations. Frankly, that's where a lot of people got high a lot of the time, walking around in nature, all of that. And I remember I was going to go up on this hill. It was called Cherry Blossom Hill. And I had just missed breakfast. This is my day of fasting. I'm going to take 24 hours. So I missed breakfast, and now I'm waiting for lunchtime to occur. And it was only a few hours. And I swear, on the top of that hill, I felt like I was Mahatma Gandhi, fasting for the emancipation of humanity. And meanwhile, I missed only 2 hours of eating. So, I come to find out later that it takes a good 2 to 3 days to even get into a fast. But of course, back then, it didn't matter. I felt such a sense of accomplishment kind of taking this time to do that. Well, to make the story short, I decided medicine would not be my vehicle. I wanted to do something that was more drugless. So I ended up going into chiropractic education. I had been fired up by certain chiropractors that I had met. They seemed to be very, centered in their work of healing and healthcare and so on. And so I went to Palmer College of Chiropractic, where I actually started a natural hygiene club. And during the time of my education, I brought in all of the major docs that were running fasting institutions. So I brought in Dr. Scott and Dr. Chris Curcio and Alec Burton, and these people would come in and give lectures, and it kind of inspired this kind of contact with a new and different way of thinking. And so when I finally became licensed as a chiropractor, I decided that I wanted to do and learn more about fasting. So I went and did my apprenticeship for a year with Dr. David Scott. And Dr. Scott had a fasting institution that he ran probably for 50 years in one of the suburbs of Cleveland called Strongsville. And as it turned out, he had his own blood laboratory. So I wound up running his lab, and I wound up learning about the parameters, the blood parameters, the chemistries of fasting, working with Dr. Scott for that year. And then from there, I got my first job, and it was trial by fire. I became a health director in my late 20s at a place called the Shangri Natural Hygiene Institute. And this is kind of an intriguing story because it was run and founded by a man called David Cheatham. And R.J. Cheatham, sorry, David Cheatham is an old chiropractor, R.J. Cheatham, who had an advanced form of malignant melanoma. And he was told that he had very short time to live. He got into the workings and writings of Dr. Shelton, and he put that in play, and he ended up living another 30 years. In fact, he buried all the doctors that told him he wasn't going to survive. So this little 8-acre property became this kind of fasting and nutrition haven of natural hygiene right in Bonita Springs on the Gulf Coast of Florida, which was intriguing. So I got an offer in my late 20s to be the health director there. And they had 100+ people a week, and usually 30, 40 to 50 fasters a week at one time. And I was the only doc. I worked with a internist, a guy that was up in Fort Myers, which is about 20 minutes north of that place. And by the time before I was 30, I ended up supervising over 5,000 water fasts on every major form of pathology. And I mean, there were life-threatening illnesses, addictions. We did everything there. And it was a remarkable, remarkable place. And then, just to make the story short, from leaving there, I wanted to do more research. I decided, and I went back to Emory Med School, got my PhD in neuroendocrinology and cell biology, ended up going from there to be on the Faculty of Medicine at the University of Texas, where they were the leading aging research center in the world in the 1980s. And they were doing all the work on calorie restriction and aging, because the observation was that when animals restrict calories, they can live as much as 50% longer. So I love that research. I love the work that they were doing there. I was able to get a job there with Dr. Ed Mazzaro, who was the granddaddy of metabolism in the world at that point, and he loved me. He looked like Yoda in Star Wars. He was just amazing. And I worked in his lab, and we did all of that work. And a lot of what people now know about intermittent fasting and all that, and the impact of calorie restriction, comes from that work back in the late 80s and 1990s. I then ended up going from there to run the Regency Health Spa for the next 24 years, which is a residential center where we had 50 to 100 people a week, all plant-based, and we did juicing and food and lifestyle, and I was the main health director of that program. And then when the pandemic, right before, around 2013, that business closed. I opened a series of other places. And that led, after the pandemic, to me now doing retreats once a month in South Florida at a business called Balance for Life Retreat, Balance for Life Florida, where we still do salt, oil, and sugar-free plant nutrition, juicing, and water fasting, but we only do it a week a month, and we do that on a regular basis. So that kind of tracks my history through all of that. Okay, we're going to stop right now and take a short break to hear from our sponsor, the National Health Association, and we'll be right back. And when we come back, we want to talk about some things related to the real importance of the NHA, the work that they've been doing over the past 76 years, frankly, to really put this message out, my relationship to that information, why I feel that that is so important, such an important change in our life and history right now, and even for the benefit and health of individuals and the planet. So we'll be right back.
You're listening to the NHA Health Science Podcast. Dr. Frank Sabatino here, encouraging you to check out the NHA membership. For just $35 a year in the US and $55 internationally, you'll have access to a wealth of resources, including our quarterly full-color print magazine, Health Science. Stay updated on the latest health tools, inspiring stories, and exclusive events like the NHA Conference and plant-exclusive cruises. Join us at healthscience.org/membership and make a difference in your life and the world. I'm Dr. Frank Sabatino, your host, and now back to the NHA Health Science Podcast, where more exciting insights await you.
Welcome back to the Health Science Podcast. If you didn't know, I'm on the hot seat today. I am the one being interviewed on our 100th show. Again, I want to really thank our viewers and the people that have made this show what it is and have kept it alive for all of these episodes, because it's been really a life changer. And you know, when I go to conferences now, it's just amazing to me how many people come up and thank us for really doing this, that the NHA has really put this out there. And with that in mind, it's important to realize that the National Health Association is the oldest plant exclusive organization in the world, starting in 1948, when Shelton and some of the founders like Dr. William Esser and Dr. Curcio put this natural hygiene thing on the map. So if you think about it, from 1948 to now, we're talking 76 years that this has really been operating. That's really pretty remarkable. That it's been all this time. And of course, they've been teaching the stuff that now over the last, 20, 30 years has become more popular. As everybody knows, we see this evolution of lifestyle medicine. In fact, we've interviewed so many docs on our show that are practitioners of lifestyle medicine. Well, lifestyle medicine is just an update of all of the hygienic principles. So this is something that the NHA was at the forefront of doing. When I was taken in and accepted into a group called the Association of Natural Hygiene Practitioners, that back in 1979, we were doing fasting. We were doing this work all the way from that point forward. And so I love the fact that medicine has kind of caught up with this mentality of seeing the importance of lifestyle choice and change for really effectively preventing and reversing major diseases. But I think it's important for our audience to know that we're coming from a body of physicians and practice and an organization that's been doing this a lot longer than a lot of people even realize, going way back into the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. So, I'm happy to see it because it puts it out into the consciousness of people. But, when I look back at my own life, I'd spent 47 years as a vegan, and the last animal products I had was probably 54 years ago. And when you talk about that kind of time period in a culture that makes you feel like you can't survive without animal products, you can't survive without medical treatment, we now know that probably 50% of everybody that dies from things like heart disease and cancer, which are really preventable problems. Probably the greatest number of diseases, the most popular or the most devastating chronic diseases that kill the most people, are where we spend our most healthcare dollars chronically. And we now know that, and if you think about the fact that we're spending $3 to $4 trillion on healthcare, and the return on that investment is not great, because the fact of the matter is we still see over the last 30 years that the escalation of heart disease and type 2 diabetes and cancers. And when we know that these are incredibly not only preventable, but reversible issues. And I've been very fortunate on the forefront of clinical institutions that I've been connected to see the reversal of these problems in hundreds and even thousands of people. So I'm happy that the world and science has really been putting the data out to hammer home what we have seen over a very long period of time. And it's very important for our audience to realize the power that is inherent in their personal choice. That when you make these choices of lifestyle, not only can you prevent these major conditions and problems, but you can absolutely reverse them even at later stages of life. So, if you think about that power that we have, that ability to be autonomous, that we don't have to be connected to drug use, we don't have to be connected to risky interventions, when simple approaches of plant food and physical activity and stress response management and sleep, the basic pillars of hygiene, which have become the pillars of lifestyle medicine, are creating the greatest benefit and outcome in these major health concerns. And we get a much better return on our investment with less invasive stuff. And the data now supports this remarkably. And we see that whether it's Framingham, or whether we see the Adventist 2 studies, or we see the EPIC Oxford studies, Suchi studies in Taiwan, all of these studies that have looked at vegan and vegetarian populations have shown the significant benefit of focusing on plant nutrition to lower blood pressure, lower blood sugar, reverse cancers, reverse inflammatory diseases, effectively change even infectious diseases, all of these kinds of changes. So that's been a remarkable observation and change over time. And I'm happy that more and more data is being generated and more people are being made aware that they have this power in their personal choice. And it comes down to what Shelton said many years ago. You have the freedom to make personal choice. You're not free to choose the consequences. So you have to understand that when we make a choice, there's always a consequence. And that question then is that consequence moving you toward life and health, or isn't it? As you've heard, I've mentioned this NHA, this organization that's been so etched in this kind of historical perspective of plant-based living. And I think it's important to really understand how important this organization really is and why it's important to me. When I was first learning this information, you almost felt like you were in a vacuum. I had no idea that there was this amazing organization that was putting this message out, and they've only gotten more and more intense and grounded in that message. One of the beautiful things about the National Health Association is that it has nothing to sell. And that's always been a real big thing to me, because you'll notice on the internet, online, people always kind of have an agenda. There's a product or something associated with their message. The beautiful thing about the National Health Association is that it's selling you on yourself. It's selling you on the power that you have within, the idea that health is built by healthful living, and that if we can just embrace those conditions of life that support life and health are going to be a natural part of our existence and our being. So it's been an organization that has no agenda to sell. So they put out the most incredible magazine, Health Science, 4 times or so a year. They have the most amazing conferences. And I have to say that I've attended many summits and many conferences, and there's really nothing like the NHA conference, which is held usually the last weekend in June every summer. It's been typically held in Cleveland the last few years. There are times when it's been in other locations, but it's mostly been in Cleveland more recently. And what happens here is you've got 300 to 400 people that come together in this kind of camaraderie and community. And now we've come to realize how important community really is for life and health. And what's nice is they have some of the best speakers in the world from all the fields of medicine and psychology and so on who come to present. And the beautiful thing is many of these experts just mingle with the guests. We're sitting down, we're talking, we're sharing meals together, we're sharing time together. So it's a remarkable community and camaraderie of the most life-changing information that is available to people, with a magazine that backs it up. And over the years, what's happened with Health Science, that magazine and the work of the NHA, it's been even more effectively grounded in what I like to call the evidence base. So as the science evolves, as we gather more and more information, and even some of the docs within the organization are doing their own research. For example, the fasting research done out at True North with Dr. Goldhammer and his group, and people like Dr. Barnard with Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. All of that information and all this database now comes into the work of the NHA to only reinforce from a solid foundation of data and information what we're teaching. So I love the fact that the NHA really gathers and harbors these thinkers and these activists and these people whose only agenda is to promote human health, animal support, and environmental integrity and balance. And there is no organization that I've seen that does it the way that they do. So I've been very proud to be part of that over many, many years. And I think because of my connection with that organization over such a long period of time, I was, in the last few years, offered this position of being the director of health education, kind of like a legacy move for me. And I was very proud and happy to take that on, to do writing for the organization, writing for their website. They have an incredible website, healthscience.org. On that site, you have incredible opportunity to go back and take advantage of all the magazine, all the articles that have been written by all of these tremendous people over decades, and glean those articles. There's recipes in those books that you can put your own cookbook together with SOS-free presentations. There's an incredible newsletter. And more recently, they've even taken on the idea of healthy travel. So the entire travel industry is being renovated by the connection with the NHA, who are now providing these tours and these cruises all over the world. In fact, next February, they're going to Tahiti. Right now, they're in Iceland. And the beautiful thing is they hook up with Windstar and these commercial lines that have now are offering all the cuisine that we know is the best. So they're offering this plant-exclusive cuisine without added salt, oil, and sugar. So people have an opportunity not only for the community at these conferences, but now the community in terms of travel and seeing the world and experiencing different cultures while still embracing all of this positive information about health, nutrition, diet, and the like. So it's an organization that is like no other from my standpoint. And, I urge people to be part of it and to join it. I can't see any reason not to. I can't see any reason not to take advantage of the conferences. The nice thing with the evolution of social media and all that, the conferences now are also streamed at home. So not only do we have 300 or 400 people at the conference, but we can have as many as 500 to 1,000 at home at the same time participating in all of this. And we show people that we can have fun as well as provide incredible information. And even at the last conference, the last two conferences, we had Dr. Colin Campbell, we had Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, Neil Barnard, all of these incredible people that many of our audience and people out there know to have the best integrity for providing this database for the power of plant-exclusive living. And so that's what this organization stands for, and that's what it means to me, and that's why I have supported it all of these years, and that's why I'm so grateful to have been given the opportunity to be the health education director of the organization. And when we talk about the NHA, you have to understand that the organizations are only as good as the people that run them and that motivate this process of what this organization could be. And I truly have to give a shout out to Mark Huberman, the president, and Wanda Huberman, the executive director of the organization. Nobody in my experience does the job that they do of putting this together the way that they do. I got to say, when Wanda, especially Wanda with these conferences, it's mind-boggling, because I've been involved in organizing conferences and organizing summits, and to have 300 or 400 people eating 3 meals a day over a 4-day period is quite a yeoman task. and they do it with such grace and ease. It's really remarkable. So, the bottom line is that I have to give them that shout out. And again, as we said, there's this library of information that is maintained by the NHA that has, writings, old writings from many doctors in the past and all of the health science journals. And contributing to that literature, I've been very fortunate because after years of working with thousands and thousands of people, I just recently decided to put some of that, the sum total of some of that work into a book that I recently published called Weightless: Compassionate Weight Loss for Life. And I'm very proud of this because it tackles what I feel is the worst pandemic that we are experiencing on the planet today. And that's the pandemic of excessive weight and body fat. And when you think about it, 40% right now of the world is either overweight or obese. And in 10 years, it will be 50%. That means half the number of people on the globe will be dealing with this. And why is that important? Because that overweight and overfat is the greatest risk factor for the most devastating diseases in our culture, including heart disease, diabetes, cancer, and the like. So the bottom line is, when we talk about this, this is a profound situation. But what's really important to me is that when we look at this, the way it has been portrayed, it has locked people into very fad, dangerous approaches with diets and drugs. It's kind of intriguing that the dieting industry in a place like the United States is close to a $70 billion plus industry with a 95 to 98% failure rate. I want you to just let that ruminate in your mind just a little bit. That means 98% of people that opt for the typical approaches are failing. And of course, that inspires, that kind of incites a feeling of hopelessness, and rightly so, because it's so devastating. So, the question is there a way to create sustainable success? And the truth is there is, and it all is inherent in plant nutrition. So I call this a plant-powered breakthrough because the other side of this is, too often when people have looked at this problem, they've looked at it from the standpoint of only the food and activity and have not looked at the full constellation of factors that include everything from hormone balance to stress to sleep deficiency to environmental toxicity. So I really feel that I was the first one to put that all together in one place to create this gestalt, this constellation of factors. And not only that, all too often when people try to lose weight, they're put on dangerous drug approaches like Ozempic and some of these other standard off-label drugs. And they're also told that they have to embrace diets that are animal-based. You've got to have these high paleo, keto diets, all animal-based foods. And so they kind of create this image that you can't be successful in weight loss without harming and damaging animals and the planet. So again, this book is a first in really inspiring the idea and exposing the lie of animal food and processed food use, and making people realize that to achieve your health and weight loss goals, no animal or environment has to be harmed or damaged. And this is very important because a fundamental component to this way of living and eating, this plant-exclusive approach, goes far beyond just what we put on our plates. It goes far beyond the boundaries of our own kitchens and homes, because there are consequences when we put things on our plate that affect life and the environment around us. And this is that compassionate, empathetic part of this approach. That's why I called the book Weightless: Compassionate Weight Loss for Life. I think too often the message of compassion, the message of doing no harm, the message of avoiding and eschewing violence and trauma to other people, other animals, and the environment gets lost in our day-to-day consciousness. And I wanted to have a book centered on dealing with this pandemic that constantly reiterated this importance of compassion and empathy and love and nurturing ourselves and others as we achieve our health and weight loss goals. And I think I was able to really do that. And I'm really proud of the fact that I was able to do that. So to me, that's a big part of what this lifestyle is about. People talk about the Indian philosophy of ahimsa, which goes back centuries and centuries. And that's a do no harm philosophy. That's really the foundation of what this is really about. How can we uplift each other? How can we support all other life forms? Because the truth is, we're all connected on this planet. We are a web, and each of us is a strand, a thread that is connected to everything else. And when we disturb one part of that thread, we disturb the entire matrix. We kind of interrupt and create dissonance in the entire tapestry. So we need to understand our connection, that things are fundamentally connected. And we don't need to get lost in hidden agendas about religion and sexual, misogyny and all of the stuff that happens with abuse and trauma that goes on. The more we start understanding that there are no barriers between people of different colors. There are no real barriers between people of different sexes or genders. There are no barriers between different species. The more we start understanding the connectiveness of things, the more we can take a more rightful place in collaborating to create a more compassionate and loving world. And, the time for a little change is past. It's not time for incremental change. We got to make big shifts right now. The house is burning. And when the house is burning down, you don't throw a teaspoon of water on it. You've got to get a big change going on. And that's where we are. So to me, that's what the book is about, but that's what this whole lifestyle is about. And frankly, that's what the NHA as an organization is about, helping people realize that this is the direction that we need to go, or we will not survive as a species, and this planet will be devastated by our man-made consequences. As we've talked about this, we just finished up with this idea that we're in a house that's kind of on fire and we need to do something to change things. And I don't want to create an image of hopelessness, because that's not where I'm coming from. The idea, even my book, is a manual of hope. It's a way that we can make choices that now can start to turn things around. My only point is that we don't have a lot of leeway of time to do that. We need to step on the gas, so to speak. So if we want to look at what are the things that we can do to really effectively make better change, well, the first thing, without any question, is eating plant exclusive. There is no way around it. Right now, we know that what Silas Rouse has called the killing machine is really, when we look at the animal food industry, what's being generated from that industry is contributing to about 85 to 90% of abnormal climate change. If we don't stop the killing and violence of animals and the production of food from animal sources, we will not make the dent that we need to make. So the first step for all of us is to really understand the importance of moving in a plant exclusive direction. If that means you start off small and start making little changes that you can, that's fine. In my book, I talk about jumpstart programs. Many people have a lot of things online that can show you how to start making these changes. But to me, that's the biggest, most fundamental change that has to happen there. The second change is realizing that, we really want to expand our sense of community. We need to really understand this goal of helping others. So how do we make contributions maybe in our own home environments? There are many people that don't have accessibility to good food. They live in conditions and circumstances that it's not available. Can we support things like food banks and other things locally? Can we work with, farmers markets and farmers? Can we support what they're doing more emphatically to provide more of this food across the board in more of a connected way in a community sense? And we know that community involvement is really important. So in your own community, are there groups that can come together? Are there ways to spread this message? Can you bring in speakers? Can you organize a kind of a grassroots group that allows you to spread this message in your local community? Think about that. If everybody kind of did that locally, we would have a global connection to that consciousness more and more. So understanding our place in the world a little bit more effectively, and really engendering a certain kind of kindness in our lives, a compassion for others. We were interviewing someone the other day, and I loved the line, and my staff and my production crew felt it too. There's always that statement of people telling you, live each day like it's your last day. And the comment was, don't live like it's your last day. Treat everybody like it's their last day. And so that was just a remarkable concept of doing what we can to uplift and help each other. And each of us in our lives can come from a place where we can challenge our own perceptions of how we are seeing disconnection, or how we may be participating in disconnection, how we view someone of a different gender, or we view someone of a different sexual orientation or a religious belief. How can we transcend our own perceptions and really embrace the precious moments that we have in a more dynamic and magical way to really live them, but live them in a way where we foster that sense of connection and community. And I think that kind of mentality, especially starting with this idea of veganism as a do no harm situation, how can we promote change in the most loving way possible, not coming from a standpoint of hate, but spreading a message of love while we look at, effectively changing the environment, effectively changing, our eating habits and all of that. And it's important for us all to realize that we have this potential with every single choice to make remarkable positive change. What I tell people is, take a look at your life. We made the point that we're free to make choice, but we're not free to choose the consequences. Sit down, take out a little pad of paper, take a little journal, and decide what are your personal goals. Are you trying to achieve better weight, better health, more mobility, more kindness? Are the choices you're making, are the consequences of those choices congruent and in line with those outcomes? And all of us need to do that self-reflection, that self kind of interrogation just a little bit to become more aware of who we are and where we are in this moment. And then take a look at those choices. And if they're not congruent, then each of us has to put the big boy and big girl pants on and realize that we need to make different choices. And as we do that, instead of getting lost in, good, this is good and that's good or bad, we get away from that kind of religious mentality and we start looking at life as a process of evolution and change that is being determined by us evaluating the consequences of our own choices and actions and using our choice to take in that information to modify future choice so that we keep moving forward in a very positive way. And I think if we do that and we center it around this compassionate mode of eating plant exclusive, we will definitely create a more compassionate, loving world, and we will create a more compassionate and loving person that we can be. I really feel that that is our legacy, that the highest ideals of human evolution and behavior are compassion, empathy, and love. And the more we deviate from that, we're deviating from the greatest ideal of human evolution. But as we embrace that, we're evolving in a way that will just be an uplifting, collaborative opportunity to change this world in a very powerful and positive way. I really want to, thank my host today and the subject of my talk. So I want to thank you, Frank. Thank you, Frank. Yes, I'll thank myself for that process. And I want to thank the National Health Association, of course. And I really want to thank you all for being with us today. And I really want to thank you for supporting us, helping us get to this 100th program, which is really a remarkable, wonderful milestone for the National Health Association. So I want to thank you for being part of this incredible, healthy, active community. And on behalf of the National Health Association, I'm your host, Dr. Frank Sabatino, and I look forward to being with you on the next episode of the Health Science Podcast. Thank you so much for being with us.
You've been listening to the Health Science Podcast, brought to you by the National Health Association. Thank you for joining us today and for your commitment to evidence-based health science that backs a whole food, plant-exclusive lifestyle and contributes to the well-being of all people, animals, and our environment. I'm your host, Dr. Frank Sabatino. Be sure to leave a rating and a review, and we'll see you on the next show.